morning from Korea and good afternoon to Fiji and good
Good
evening
afternoon.
to, thank you. Good evening to Montreal and Jamaica. I hope everyone got good sleep lesson yesterday, and I hope today's meeting is also successful and fruitful. First, I'd like to make a small announcement for the housekeeping. Please make sure everyone is muted unless you are speaking. And today, we are going to start with the Q&A session for action plan we talked about yesterday. And after that, we will continue the presentation of our country report. First of all, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen well? Okay. If anyone have the questions for the action plan, especially the key elements for the action plan development, please let us know. And so I or the Madam Chair will answer your question. If you have a question, please, there is some key for raise hand, and then I will give the floor. At this moment, I don't see anyone who would like to take asking for the floor. Okay, then you can ask question later later in this session or anytime during the breakout session. So I just move on to the presentation of country report. And I think today we will start the presentation from Ms. Ginny Natarda. Let me know if you are ready, Miss Ginny Natarda. Is Natarda ready or having some difficulties to access the Zoom?
Sorry. Good morning.
Okay, thank you.
This is Hilda. Miss Natandra and Miss Jayanti Singh's group is not ready. Can the next group present?
Sure, of course, go ahead. Then next group will be Miss Nalomaka and Miller. Can Secretariat give the floor to Miss Nalomaka or Miller?
Okay. Bula Vinaka, on behalf of Ms. Lamba Miller and I, while she's still trying to load our presentation, take this time to introduce ourselves. Ms. Lamba Miller is a fisheries assistant with the offshore division, and I'm a fisheries officer with the inshore fisheries management division. Apologies for the technical difficulties we're facing at the moment. Ms. Lamba is still trying to share screen with us. So our country report, briefly for Lamba and I, was prepared with emphasis placed on the work that the units that or the divisions that we work for do. So a lot of emphasis will be placed on the work that the inshore fisheries management division and offshore fisheries management division does in terms of sampling, taxonomy, and women's leadership. So I'll give the screen over to Ms. Lemba Miller to begin our presentation. Pinaka.
Okay. Thanks, Jackie, for introducing us. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me, Jackie? Okay, thank you. So our presentation is a two-part presentation. I'll be presenting on the first part, which is on the assessment of marine bioresource information in Fiji, and Jackie will present on the second part of the presentation. So given the time we had and the time we took to put this report together, we decided early on to focus on what we knew and our combined experiences and background before doing a bit of desktop research and trying to tie it all back to the Ministry of Fisheries. So the first part, assessment of marine bioresource information. So government and non-government sectors play a huge role in the collection and analysis of marine bioresource data. There are several ongoing regional and international projects whereby the Ministry of Fisheries is like the focal point with ground support. Given the broad scope at which marine bioresource is used, managed, and studied in Fiji, this part will focus on a few marine bioresource projects that are carried out within the Ministry of Fisheries and those that extend to other organizations. So the first part, biological sampling and preservation status. MOF's involvement in biological sampling is normally upon request. These samples are almost immediately handed over to the requesting party for analysis. So we frame the first point as ad hoc requests for biological samples. So what normally triggers these type of requests is that is like after an unexpected event. So one such example we've got there, dead whales washed ashore. This event, being whales washed ashore in Serua, was an unexpected event. So what happened was researchers contacted a research team. This happened back in 2016, and they had asked for samples from the dead whales. And so once those samples were retrieved, they were handed over to USP for analysis. Then several projects are also undertaken by researchers from universities, and at times they partner with the Ministry of Fisheries doing fieldwork. So one such example for these projects is the National Turtle Genetics Project. So this project is USP partnering with the Ministry of Fisheries, and they work together to gather biological samples from nesting turtles found in Fiji. And the information is then used to determine Fiji's nesting turtle population and to map out the various nesting sites around Fiji. So what they do is they extract biological samples. The initial processing takes place at the molecular lab, where they do a PCR test, and then they send those samples overseas for DNA sequencing. Regional projects for biological sampling that the Ministry of Fisheries takes part in. Through MOF's Offshore Fisheries Management Division, we have biological sampling and preservation is tasked to our observers with the National Observer Program and the Regional Observer Program for out-at-sea sampling and occasionally port sampling of pelagic species. So this is a regional project and part of SPC's Oceanic Fisheries Program, whereby observers are trained in the collection and preservation of biological samples. There are 7 types of biological samples collected. These include the stomach, muscles, livers, gonads, otoliths, spines, dorsal spines, and blood. So these biological samples are carefully extracted, preserved, and these are later sent to SPC in New Caledonia for analysis and input into the Pacific Marine Specimen Tissue Bank. So with MOF, we do have a research division, and there are officers from our research division that are part of this training. And we believe that they will cover this area into details with their report and presentation in terms of statuses and challenges in biological sampling and preservation within our ministry. So biological sampling and preservation challenges. So these are just a few that we've outlined here. The first being lack of sampling equipment. So this is one of the challenges that we face, and often relying on our partners that want samples to provide the necessary equipment. We have a lack of storage facilities to store biological samples, not just with MOF, but this is also some of the other issues we have here in Fiji. For example, at USP, the Marine Reference Collection Room, there's limited storage space there, and over there they keep, they preserve specimens. We have a lack of training staff. For example, so this is more so for ad hoc requests. This is more to do with accessibility. So with the Ministry of Fisheries, we are normally approached because we have people in remote areas that can collect biological samples. But this also poses as a challenge because there's not enough trained staff across the board to ensure that proper procedures are undertaken and that the integrity of the samples are maintained. So taxonomy, status and challenges. Okay, so there is both a challenge and a status. However, there are offices within MOF who specialize in marine species identification and classification, and we've put them in bullet point forms there. So we have a research team and they're trained to identify both fish and invertebrates, inshore fisheries. Their data team, all of them are trained in fin fish identification down to scientific classification to species level. There are also plans in place to expand to common marine invertebrates found in the market. So throughout the ministry, we have compliance and enforcement teams as well, also trained in species ID. And this is more to do with species that are protected by fisheries. And then we have our ROP, and these are the regional observers and identify mammals holding. When an officer is not familiar with a particular specimen, you know, they can collect written description or photographs for classification later. And also technology and the internet has come a long way to assist with this. But when in doubt, we can turn to our partners, engage with several specialized experts from USB, SPC, WCS. For example, at USB, we have Miss Bindia, and she's trained in freshwater invert taxonomy.
Ms. Miller,
She's a freshwater invert taxonomist.
Ms. Miller, I'm
Laura
really
Will.
sorry, but you have 2
Yes.
minutes left. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay, moving on. Managing biological information and status. So the ministry uses standard forms to collect data, and data collection is entered into a database. That's how we do things. Biological samples collected by observers, data and samples are collected for challenge here. So however, a challenge that became apparent at the onset of COVID-19 when flights were affected was getting those biological samples to organizations that would be analyzing the samples. So as these programs are aimed at training how to collect samples, not so much in analyzing the biological samples ourselves. Also, another challenge is the standard forms. These forms are normally paper-based, and so sometimes you have different people entering that data onto a database, and an electronic form would streamline the process of data collection and reduce paper waste and so forth. MOF is also large, and each division or region is collecting their own data separately. So in most cases, storing data in an MS Excel spreadsheet, which has its own limitation. And one particular setback is the tedious task of re-entering data if the latest file on the laptop is, you know, suddenly missing, computer crashes or something like that. Sorry, my throat is dry. By research. So for me, workshop or this training is working towards. So, but one such solution would be creating a working group and, you know, getting all the relevant parties together, analyze and store the information so that we can easily, you know, efficiently share information within each of the organizations. But then we'd also need to determine the information and how it will be shared, because this is also an issue that we have. Thank you. Jackie will take on from here.
Because of the time limit for part 2 solutions. So in general, for leadership, women's leadership in marine scientific research, we see an increase in terms of Fiji moving forward with women leadership, but we're still facing the biggest challenge of tradition and social hierarchy. So our slides, I'm sure, will be available to us after all the country presentations. You'll be able to read through. So these are just some of the women that are blazing the trail for marine scientific research in Fiji. And these are some upcoming women who are taking the step to further their education by getting masters and PhDs that are currently enrolled in tertiary institutions here in Fiji, specifically USB. So like I said before, one of the major challenges is moving into a field that is previously dominated by male and the social and traditional hierarchy in Fiji. So this often causes women to be underappreciated, under-recognized when it comes to their leadership within this scientific research field. So there are organizations or CSOs in Fiji that are working towards increasing the capacity of women leaders in Fiji, and one such is the Fiji Women's Rights Movement, and they have a intergenerational women's leadership program for women aged 15 to 22. And we are also lucky that our partners such as Quaker are also placing recognition on women's leadership and offering programs such as the one we are blessed to be part of. And in conclusion, marine bioresources information is critical for informing management actions for the sustaining, maintaining, and protecting of Fiji's marine resources. So we feel that it is vital that we collaborate with each other and our partners to ensure that the information that we need is gathered, stored, and shared in a way that makes it easier for us to manage our marine resources. And also, we can also use this platform to advocate and strengthen awareness on strengthening women leading scientific research in Fiji. And these are just some of our references from the research that we did while trying to put our country report together. Vinaka level for listening.
Thank you, Miss. Thank you for both of speaker. And then let me move on to the next group, which is Miss Lobenda Buvakarua and Visa. I just want to make myself clear. Please limit your presentation within 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
Vinaka, good afternoon and bula vinaka to you all. Our presentation today is basically on our country report that was submitted. Your slide show. Sorry. So our outline for this presentation is basically we'll introduce a topic, moving on to biological sampling and preservation in terms of its status and challenges. Thirdly, the taxonomy status and challenges, managing of biological information, and status of women's leadership in marine scientific research, and finally the challenges in establishing women's leadership in marine scientific research. Our introduction, we won't be into details with introduction since it has been discussed by our other colleagues. However, we will proceed to our next slide, which is biological sampling and preservation. Simply, biological sampling is the collection and observation of living marine organism, includes quantitative to determine the abundance in the time and space. while preservation is protection and conservation of ecosystem in the ocean. So Fiji is blessed with diverse and rich marine ecosystem, marine environment. Moving on to its status, Fiji is currently undertaking a program called the Observer Program that operates in the Western and Central Pacific Ocean. This program is coordinated by SPC, which are responsible for collection of biological samples. These samples include stomach, othelids, spine, muscles, liver, and blood, in order to run analysis for the reproduction of fish, aging, and the growth. Underwater visual sensors is also one of the techniques that the Fijian government, in order to record and to monitor the fish species compositions, abundance, and to determine the recovery rate of the population of marine ecosystem. Currently, the government, through the Ministry of Environment Fisheries, is collaborating with other government agencies and stakeholders to meet its global goal, establish a network of 30% MPAs. It is an impressive number of traditional inshore fishing areas have established management plan, temporary and permanent areas to manage, that is in their no-take zones, a key component of their local managed marine areas. Enforcement of Fisheries Act and related regulation is also part of this component. Formal establishment of marine protected areas, surveying traditional fishing areas, working with associated communities in preparation of management plan. Fiji Fisheries implemented the seasonal ban, that is for finfish during its spawning period. For example, grouper and coral trout, that is from 1st of June, the 30th of September every year. One of a few challenges that we have come up is lack of resources to carry out these researches. Lack of national legislation is also a major drawback, as there's no resource management guidelines to follow. Also, poor knowledge of fish marine ecosystem and biodiversity. Fourthly, the lack of awareness of the part of coastal communities for limitation of fisheries development and the consequences of over-exploitation. Acquiring knowledge through the sample analysis, so that simply means when the data are collected and analyzed, staff are not able to interpret the result correctly. Moving on to our taxonomy, this will be discussed by my colleague Maria Naka.
With taxonomy, this entails the description, naming, and classification of living marine organisms. As you all heard from the other groups, the Ministry of Fisheries currently, they don't have any taxonomies there. So in order for us to classify all these living organisms, we usually rely on CSOs, NGOs, and other organizations for their help to classify all these organisms. So in this slide, this is just a few of WWF, which is an NGO we're working together here in Fiji. This is some of their work that they did. Currently of scientific evaluations that indicates high levels of cryptic speciation. Actually, they also did a biological survey in Kumbula coast of Mbua that was completed in 2005 by, and this provided additional information as well. So this new research is likely to reveal much greater complexity in diversity, biodiversity than previously thought. That's east of Fiji. The biodiversity of tropical seas declined sharply, which in turn suggests that Fiji's reefs in the Western Pacific are an important source of biodiversity in a region characterized by isolated islands and atolls. So the challenges. So the current challenges that we're facing with taxonomy, the knowledge, actually we currently don't have any taxonomist with the Ministry of Fisheries, so we don't have knowledge. Some of us don't have knowledge or a little bit of knowledge of how to distinguish all these marine organisms. And the information gaps need to be filled and opportunities for collaboration identified to ensure that conservation efforts and considerations for further research and monitoring, which is an integral part of future marine conservation and resource management planning. There's also the pressures. So the pressure being placed on marine environment and its biodiversity today, which exceeds current conservation efforts, the alleviation of poverty and enhancement of community capacity to pursue sustainable livelihood needs should be tackled in partnership with the efforts, conservation efforts. There is also a number of promising initiatives and programs being conducted at national, regional, and international level, but a concerted effort is required. So we need all hands-on work together. The Ministry of Fisheries with other agencies, especially NGOs, CSOs, and other agencies that involves with this. Yeah, so the next slide will be discussed by our other group member, Ms. Hilda Lovendan. Thank you.
Naka, on our next part, how do we manage this biological information? Basically, the use of database. Two of the most used database within the fisheries sector is Tufman. This is the database system that is developed by OFP, which is used to store and retrieve various forms of fisheries related data collected from national tuna fisheries. And the other one is Biodiesys, the new biological database that was developed in 2010 for storing stomach analysis data. But however, this particular database is now integrated to store and record other biological sampling data that is collected. Traditional marine environmental knowledge can also play an important role in the setting and management of biological information. And lastly, implementing of size limits. This is from the data that is collected will be passed on to the policymaker within the ministry. They'll create and implement a size limit. Two of the major challenges that normally faced is less or no expert to maintain those database and lack of resources. I'll pass this time to Hilda to present on.
Madam, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Status of women's leadership in marine scientific research. As we all know, women are more involved in fisheries in the informal sector than the formal sector. And I can also say that gender bias in Fiji still exists. Women are underrepresented as leaders. This is because of the mind model, you know, the perspectives that we have in terms of culture and traditions that exist within Fiji. I'd like to speak about the head of research division in the ministry as well. She's female, a very strong person, and I feel like her testimony is able to help other young people, especially women, to get involved in marine scientific research. And in Fiji, women are involved in pearl oyster development projects, fisheries research and conservation projects, mariculture, giant clam, and other seaweed-related projects. So women play a very important role in fisheries as a whole in Fiji. The challenges exist, and most of the time we try and prove ourselves, women fighting to be in this space. So, and the fear is that sometimes we try to identify, and understanding our role as a woman, and then in addition to that is how do we become a leader in a society where we constantly competing for space, for the leadership space. I think one of the major impacts is social psychology, in particular stereotypes, that has a huge impact on our performance, noting the culture, noting the tradition that we have in Fiji and in the Pacific. These stereotypes have a huge impact on our performance, and stereotypes such as mind models, the generalization that women are weak, that women are not as intelligent as men, and women are too emotional or too soft to be good leaders. So these are the constant challenges that we women face in terms of getting to the marine scientific research space. The challenges, I think, is lack of training, accredited qualification. They don't really need to go through, let's say, a professional or getting a degree, but some sort of accredited qualification that could help, especially women in the rural communities. One thing that we also can promote is through the grassroots levels, in primary school, instill in young people, especially women, that they could be the best or whatever they want to be when they grow older, and not when they come into university. I think, and I believe it's a bit too late. So starting from the grassroots level is very important. Lack of equal opportunities for women to participate in ocean science, and absence of appropriate standards of advancing the involvement of women, and lack of awareness, especially in informal settlements in terms of decision makings, because women, our input, I believe, is important, and is critically as important as men. And we bring in perspective that the other gender might not be able to understand. So those are some of the points, very briefly, that I think that women are up against in this space. But it's also good to see that we're coming up, especially in the Ministry of Fisheries, that we're developing, and it is being recognized, the need to assist gender equality. That's all from this group, and I think the expectation at what we want to achieve at the end of this this course is to have this collaborated and networking space where we could safely come and share experiences, safely come and share information, and have information shared freely to a certain extent. There's some information that we understand in terms of security, but there's some information that we can also share to help the development of women in Fiji. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Next group is the, I understand Miss Ginny and Miss Natarda are ready. So can you give the floor to that group? Thank you.
Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me well from the other side. Yeah, Ms. Jayanti is setting up our to share our presentation to you this morning. This afternoon, sorry. As we're setting up our presentation via Zoom, sorry, my internet's kind of slow this afternoon. Bula vinaka to everybody. Namaste, hello, annyeonghaseyo. To the facilitators, my fellow colleagues here, to Mr. Mo and the team from the other side from Korea, and from the team from ISA. We're thankful that we are joining the Global Women's Leadership Training in Marine Bioresources Information System 2021. We're having difficulties sharing our presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Nataldo, for warm words. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. I don't know why this thing is giving up on us. We're so eager to share our presentation to you all. But I hope the other ladies had a good night's sleep. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna turn on my camera, so you can just hear my lovely voice. So Jayanti and I are presenting our a snapshot of our country report to you this morning. Because we've taken up so much of your time, and we're so sorry for that. On the screen, you'll see that we've put up a little, we call it a subtitle. It's within the theme of the Global Women's Leadership Training in Marine Bioresources Information System, but we've subtitled our presentation as Reviving Fiji's Fisheries, the Way Forward. You'll probably ask why this subtitle. It's just because we work within the fisheries sector, the Ministry of Fisheries in Fiji, and the research findings and whatever that we've put up in our country report and in the presentation this morning is mainly within the scope of fisheries. So we look forward to your attention as we go through our presentation this morning. But before we go through, I'd like to just emphasize that whatever that we're presenting is our pre-existing understanding and knowledge of what this training is about on marine bioresources and information in Fiji. It'll probably have yet to present, but we hope that you'll enjoy whatever we present to you this morning. To quickly go through our presentation outline, is that on the screen? We have a 17-slide presentation, but they're not too detailed. We'll just put across little information here and there. More details can be found in our country report that we've sent across last week. Yes, I know that the other ladies have shared these already, but we like to emphasize again, this is what sets Fiji apart. Our lovely sandy beaches, our mountain terrains, our arable lands, a beautiful coral reef system, and the rich biodiversity and endemic species that exist in Fiji. This is what people love about Fiji, and Fiji is a small island with a large ocean space. A simple demography of Fiji in our latest census that came out last year, early this year, we have a little over 1 million people that live in this friendly island of Fiji. And I'd like to boast and say that we are the hub of the Southwest Pacific, and we have one of the developed economies in the Pacific as well. But we're happy to say that we are a multicultural country where people of different ethnicity call Fiji their home. And that's what makes Fiji unique as well. In terms of our maritime zones, Fiji has an exclusive economic zone of around 1.3 million kilometers squared, with a total coastline of 1,129 kilometers. Fiji is an archipelago. We've established our archipelagic waters under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and we also have our territorial seas. We have sovereign rights within our Fiji's EEZ and sovereignty within our territorial waters and archipelagic waters. While on that, based on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, if I'm correct, Articles 238 to 240 gives the sovereign rights to Fiji as a coastal state to conduct marine scientific research within our exclusive economic zones. So that's directly related to the training that we're doing as well in terms of marine scientific research. Fiji as a coastal state has sovereign rights to conduct marine scientific research within our EEZ. Our fisheries sectors, the Ministry of, there are three main types of fisheries sectors in Fiji: the inshore and coastal fisheries, the offshore or the oceanic fisheries, and the aquaculture sectors. All these sectors contribute towards Fiji's GDP and foreign earnings as well in terms of export earnings. These are basically the different divisions that the Ministry of Fisheries has within its management or within its organizational structure. The inshore division, the eastern, western, central, northern. The first five all look after the coastal fisheries sector. So in terms of MCS, monitoring, control, surveillance, in terms of research, in terms of extension and advisory services, divisions 1 to 5 all look after the coastal and inshore fishery sector. The aquaculture division, aquaculture all times, everything that has to do with aquaculture, this division looks after that. The research division, as highlighted by the other ladies in this training, conduct marine resource inventory surveys and other EIAs, FIAs in Fiji and for the ministry. The offshore fisheries management division looks after, facilitates, is a technical advisory arm of the ministry in the areas of the oceanic fisheries sector. We'd just like to briefly highlight some of the laws and legislations that that mandates the Ministry of Fisheries in conducting its daily activities. We're guided by the Offshore Fisheries Management Act of 2012 and its regulations of 2014. We also are mandated through the Fisheries Act, Cap 158, in conducting our daily activities. There are other policies, national policies that that guide our work as well. And also the line agencies that we work with that have their own legislations that also relate to the work of the ministry. And they're all tied up also to the marine scientific research area as well, the EPSA Act and the Maritime Safety Act and regulations. Now into chapter 1, assessment of marine bioresources information, bioresources, biological sampling and preservation. The 3 sectors that we have on the tables, basically the status of each of the sectors, the aquaculture sector, the inshore sector, and the offshore sector, and the different biological techniques, sampling techniques that currently takes place, is conducted within these 3 different sectors, and where they are sent to. As highlighted by the other ladies as well, we have institutions that we use in terms of the analysis of these tissue samples that come out of the different sectors. We have the USP, the Institute of Applied Science, the SPC. Sometimes we use overseas laboratories as well, those located in the United States, in Australia, in our neighboring countries like Australia and New Zealand as well.
Ma'am, I'm really sorry, you have 1 minute left.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, those are some of the institutions that we send our samples to, and details can be found in our country report as well. Now I'll hand over to Jayanti to move on with our presentation.
Hello everyone, I'll be presenting from here. The challenges of biological sampling in the country, the lack of expertise, funding, and resources. Excuse me. And lack of awareness on the part of coastal communities of the development, limited data collection on inshore fisheries, hence lack of national scientific analysis done on the inshore stocks, lack of highly... Stop sharing. Sorry, some technical difficulties. Our presentation has... But I can't see the presentation. Okay, sorry for that, Mr. Yang. I'll move to chapter 2.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Sorry for that. Chapter 2, taxonomy. This much of the research has been done on taxonomy in Fiji. So here we have referenced a reference book that was done by Bob Gillett, I think last year, in which he classifies all the inshore species of Fiji, listed over about 1,400 reports, and more information it could be found in our country report. I'm sorry, Mr. Yang, we're having some technical issues with our laptops. The presentation is not moving forward. Yeah, you know.
Okay, if you want, you can.
Okay, can you see the?
Sure.
Okay.
I can see it.
Okay, great. So the challenges that we identified for the taxonomy chapter are lack of expertise, resources, and funding that is needed in this section. And Fiji is rich in species, but we lack the resources and funding. The great difficulty in classifying the close related species and habitats. Yes, and the next. Chapter 3, Managing Biological Information. So here we divided the 3 divisions for fisheries by aquaculture, inshore and offshore, and how they manage their biological information. Mostly we found out that for aquaculture and inshore, the data that is collected are mostly recorded in Excel spreadsheets and are managed through there. So the challenge here we identified is no well-established national database or information system. And for offshore division, what we identified, the biological information is managed through the regional database that is run by SPC, the Tufman2. And all the data analysis are done by using the Dorado, the cloud-based data analysis tool. And another challenge that was identified for offshore was also no well-established national database or information system. The one they're currently using is the regional based. And other challenges also available are no proper biological data sampling is done for inshore and aquaculture species. Yeah, sorry about that. Chapter 4, Assessment of Women's Leadership in Marine Scientific Research. So the information that we found here is that there's not much information available on the women's leadership in marine scientific research in Fiji. But we tried to provide some general information of women participation in sectors like there's 22% women in agriculture in Fiji, 59% in fisheries. And now in universities, especially in USP and places like this, we have more women getting enrolled in marine science studies, doing masters and PhDs in oceanography and the deep sea research. But it's not that much compared to the other countries. And the challenges that we identified for these are the lack of like a mythical representation of women in country, where women are only represented as wives, mothers, and they are considered just like other groups has mentioned. They are considered to be weaker compared to the males. And there's also lack of quantification of women's contribution in the fisheries sector. And in conclusion, we would like to say that for this training, that Marine Bioresources Information System, we're looking forward to be learning a lot from this training, especially based on science behind this. Since in the country we talk a lot about management and policy, but there's a lot of things that lack in science, in data quantifications and in data integrations, and how we can have our national database systems and how all the data can be integrated. Then it can be sent to the management and decision making. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to go on, but because of our schedule waiting for us, especially the lectures, I think I have to stop this country report right now, and then I will find the time later in this workshop for the country report. And so I just gone to our first lecture by Dr. Luciana Zinio. And she will give us a lecture on sampling method. Are you ready, Dr. Zinio?
Yes, Dr. Mo, can you hear me?
Sure, I can hear you very well. So floor is yours,
perfect.
Dr. Zinio.
Thank you. I will now try to share my screen. If you can bear with me for a little second. Here we go. Can you see my screen now? Hello?
I can see yours, Dr. Eugenia.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And good afternoon to everybody in Fiji. Greetings from Kingston, Jamaica. I'm happy to be presenting on biological sampling and preservation from the context of ISA, and going to find some of the commonalities that we can help develop your action plans and capacities. So I will start by providing a brief background outline, of my presentation. I'll start with the background to ISA and the biological communities that we find in the area. Then the sampling and preservation aspects for these communities, and collaboration opportunities and approaches that we have been discussing and hope to develop and to also inspire some of the approaches that can be applicable at your national level. And finally, I'll just give some brief insights to move forward to our discussion later on in this workshop. Okay, so I will start by recalling what we heard yesterday from the opening remarks of Ms. Lee, that the protection of the marine environment is a core mandate of the International Seabed Authority. And according to Article 145 from the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the ISA shall take necessary measures to ensure the effective protection of the marine environment from harmful effects which may arise from activities in the area, and to this end shall adopt appropriate rules, regulations, and procedures for effective environmental management. Based on this, the Assembly of the ISA has developed a strategic plan for 2019 to 2023. And one of the strategic directions is related to this mandate on the protection of marine environment, where it has been highlighted 5 key priorities. One of them, starting with developing and implementing regional environmental assessments and management plans, also ensuring public access to environmental information, and developing scientifically robust monitoring programs and methodologies that can allow effective environmental impact assessments and risk assessments. Other organs of the authority have also responsibility in implementing these mandates, namely the Legal and Technical Commission that shall develop and implement procedures that would allow, based on the best scientific evidence, to determine potential serious harmful effects on the marine environment from the activities. On the other hand, the contractors of ISA are required to collect environmental baseline data that against which those potential impacts can be assessed, and the contractors and the sponsoring states shall collaborate with the authority in implementing programs for environmental monitoring and evaluations. In this context, the Legal and Technical Commission developed a set of recommendations for guidance of contractors for the assessment of potential environmental impacts, and that are described in this document, ISBA 25 LTC 6 Rev 1, and I'm happy also to make this document available to you later on. In this document, the LTC has described the procedures for acquiring baseline data, and also how to report or facilitate the reporting of that data and in establishing collaborative programs for improving information and filling in knowledge gaps. This document also addresses the activities that require environmental impact assessments in the context of exploration. And the last section of the document has a very long explanatory commentary where it details the best available technologies and methodologies to undertake these studies, and some of which I will go through in the next slides. So in terms of environmental baseline studies, there's various variables that need to be studied and gathered. I will focus mostly on the biological community section, but we'll also briefly mention the other parameters. In terms of biological communities, the recommendations indicate that the studies should cover the communities that are on the seafloor, so the benthic communities, but also in the water column, all the way to the surface, which may be impacted by some of the operations. And so here I show very schematically the range of animals that need to be, or the communities need to be studied. I'll go in more detail in a little bit. Here we go, moving on. So I would like to just recall when we talked about the area is according to the definition in Article 1 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, is the seabed and ocean floor and subsoil thereof beyond the limits of national jurisdiction, which start at the outer limit of the continental shelf. And currently, the exploration activities, which is the phase of activities that is taking place in the area, is focused on 3 types of mineral resources: polymetallic nodules, cobalt-rich ferromanganese crusts, and polymetallic sulfides. And you can see briefly the distribution, a global distribution of these resources, and the areas where there are currently exploration contracts in the Indian Ocean, Central Indian Ocean, in the Northwest and Central Pacific, and in the North Mid-Atlantic reach, as well as one contract in the South Atlantic. In the next few slides, I will just briefly describe the main differences or considerations in terms of the biology in these habitats. So the polymetallic nodules occur in abyssal plain areas, so sedimentary areas and flat areas that are found in about 4,000 to 6,000 meters depth. As I mentioned, there's several contracts in place in the Northwest Pacific, Central Pacific, and Central Indian Ocean for polymetallic nodule exploration. In these habitats, the temperature ranges from 2 to 4 degrees Celsius, and the food is very limited and mostly comes from the snow or from organic particles from the surface, and occasionally some large inputs of organic material from food falls, whale carcasses and other types of enlarged organic inputs. Therefore, in these settings or these habitats are characterized by low abundance in terms of the distributions of organisms in these habitats. They can be quite sparse and in very few small numbers. There's mobile scavenging communities, fishes, octopus, and shrimps. There's also suspension feeder animals like some of bryozoans and sponges that are attached to the nodule surfaces, and more diverse communities are found in the sediments, either inside the within the sediments and on top of those sediments. In contrast, polymetallic sulfides are associated with hydrothermal vent geological features that can be active or inactive, and this type of habitats can also be found at shallower depths, 800 meters to 5,000 meters depth. And currently there are exploration contracts in the North Atlantic Ridge and the Indian Ocean Triple Junction Ridge. Here, very contrasting with the abyssal plain, the temperatures are very variable. So it's a very dynamic habitat with high gradients of temperature that is coming out of those black smoke chimneys. And the fluids that come out of those chimneys are enriched in chemicals and fuel the chemosynthetic based communities in these environments. These communities have very high abundances, so very dense mats of animals, including clams or mussels and giant tube worms, depending on which region we're talking. There's quite a contrasting biogeographic distribution of these communities. There's very thick bacterial mats, but there's also other suspension feeders, predators, and grazers. And there's also in the nearby or close to these ridge accesses, there's also some areas of sediments that have more other types of communities that can be more similar to the ones I described before. Moving to the cobalt-rich ferromanganese crusts, this type of mineral resource is found on top of seamounts. Seamounts are very numerous in the oceans and in particular in the Pacific. Currently, there's exploration in the Northwest Pacific region and one contract area in the South Atlantic. Again, here the temperatures are much lower and more stable. And in these habitats are driven also by organic material coming or being transported by currents from the surface. And these communities, in comparison to the previous ones that I described, can be considered medium to high abundance. There's aggregations of fishes and seabirds, and there's also, and that's why these habitats are also hotspots for fisheries. And there's also suspension feeders and rocks and crests such as corals and sponges. So after giving this general overview of the type of communities, I will move on to saying how do we sample them and what are the methodologies for sampling these communities. So one of the key aspects that is described in the recommendations, LTC recommendations, I will keep referring to these documents as LTC recommendations. It's the references is there in all the slides. Is that for sampling, we need to take into consideration the different size categories of the animals and adjust the sampling methodologies accordingly. So we define the microbial communities as the organisms that cannot be seen with the naked eye, and usually of sizes under 32 microns. The meiofauna is then the organisms that are retained in 32 micron sieves. The macrofauna are larger and they're retained in sieves of 300 microns, and the megafauna are the animals usually larger than 2 centimeters that can be observed with videos on top of the sediments. And as I said, then different methods are used to collect these types of size categories. And here I show briefly the different instruments, the multi-corer, which has a these small cylinders for collecting small organisms. These include microbes and meiofauna. The box corer for macrofauna type of organisms, and there can be time-lapse cameras that set on frames, like the one I show here on the right-hand side, to record the communities of demersal fishes and scavengers. And these instruments are used to study the abundance, taxonomic composition, diversity, and trophic group. And I'll get back to this in a little. For megafauna and resources associated fauna, then video is mostly used, so we can do surveys using tow cameras or the cameras of remotely operated vehicles that can also collect samples for then later identification of specimens. And in the water column, there are various systems of plankton nets. The one I show here is a multi-net system that can allow stratified sampling along various depths of the water column. And more recently, there's a huge development of autonomous underwater vehicles, which not only can have video and other tracking systems for nekton, so the fishes and other types of mobile or actively swimming planktonic pelagic animals, but they are also some new adaptations of filtering systems that can be adapted to these vehicles to collect plankton at higher depths. So as I mentioned, the recommendations also refer to a number of other variables, and these allow to understand the patterns of distribution and also the other environmental drivers for these communities. And here I show the importance also of seafloor mapping that can be done with systems on the vessels and also with autonomous underwater vehicles. And this mapping allows or helps to study the topography and the distribution of the different habitats. Then there's also the CTT, carousels for collecting water samples and sediment traps also to collect particles that are coming from the surface to the seafloor. These allow to study physical and chemical oceanographic parameters, and they can also be attached to in a number of different sensors to study currents and salinity, oxygen profiles, and so forth, as well as nutrients and metals. And this allows to establish the baseline conditions also of the water. And finally, I mentioned also, I show also here the instruments, again, the multi-corer and push-corer that can be used to collect sediments for biogeochemistry analysis and other geological properties that also help to understand the distribution of the animals and can also help to determine interactions between the pelagic and the benthic communities. A very important aspect that is mentioned in the recommendations is the importance of establishing a robust sampling design. And I remember that this topic came up yesterday. Some of the challenges of designing the sampling, also having standardized methodologies and considering the statistical robustness and spatial temporal variations. Finally, there are a set of parameters also mentioned that would allow to estimate and to understand the ecosystem functioning and connectivity. So these are also purposes for biological sampling that not only address the taxonomic descriptions and to study their abundances and distributions, but also to estimate for example, with the uses of tracers, isotopic tracers, understand the benthic web structure, potential ecotoxicological effects. This is still quite challenging to do with deep water samples. But there's quite a lot of development also in this area, and to study gene flow for population connectivity studies. Okay, so after I just mentioned, I went through, hopefully not too fast, on various different sampling methods for the biological communities, but also for associated environmental data. And these are mostly for sampling in deep waters. Then when the samples come to the vessel, there's so the next stage of this sampling and data workflow would be sorting, as I said, to separate the samples by different size classes. Some preliminary sorting can be done on board the vessels, and then it's also continued later on in the laboratory once they're back in land. And one of course, depending on the different habitats and settings that I described before, there can be some challenges also to do this on mobile moving vessels and trying to mostly clean and separate the sediments from the animals. And here I show an interesting example that I was that I went through. This is not a collection in any of the habitats that I described before, and as most of you know, trawling is no longer a tool that should be used. However, this was done in the scope of a long-term ocean observatory, where more than 30 years ago, they started to collect this time series information, and therefore there's still ongoing trolling samples here. This one in particular was very, very challenging. As you can see, there's huge loads of sediment that we were trying to clean. And then on the other picture, you see the catch and lots of different holoturians, cucumbers, and so on. So this is also in an abyssal plain in the North Atlantic. And the following step from after we are able to collect the animals is to preserve them. And here for preservation, there can be multiple fixatives depending on the objective of the samples. So in most cases, the ethanol is the, preferred fixation method for DNA analysis, but there could be other, for example, freezing or using other ways if other preservatives such as formaldehyde, which is no longer used so much, but depending on what's the focus, for example, for morphological analysis is still preferred in some cases. I'm sorry, these slides keep jumping. I'll try to keep them more stable. And then I'll briefly just mention the other steps, which will be addressed mostly in the next lecture by Dr. Black. So some taxonomic identification can also be taken or done on board the vessels on a preliminary basis. Here, I would just like to focus or to highlight the importance of taking good notes and good photographs, especially before, even before preservation. And then later on, the importance of archiving specimens and transferring the information into databases, reports, and publications. I'm not going to spend any time on these topics, as my colleagues will do in the next lectures, and I'm happy to discuss later in the meeting. So now I would like to just briefly go over some of the collaboration approaches and opportunities that are being discussed at the International Seabed Authority. And it's in the scope of our mandate for marine scientific research, coming from Article 143 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, that the ISA shall promote and conduct promote and encourage the conduct of marine scientific research in the area and coordinate and disseminate the results of such research and analysis when available. In this context, the Assembly of the Authority has adopted last year in December an action plan for marine scientific research in support of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Sciences, and this is based on the ISA Strategic Plan and High-Level Action Plan for 2019 to 2023, and the mandates coming from UNCLOS and the 94 Agreement. In this plan, there's 6 strategic research priorities that have been identified, and I would like to bring mostly to your attention strategic research priority number 2, to standardize methodologies for biodiversity assessments. And the following slides will be more focusing on this priority. So So our need also to standardize and compile data in, as you've mentioned also, some of the challenges with this is that we have received over many years, over the past over 20 years, more than 100 cruises took place in the CCZ area in the Indian Ocean. And other 30 cruises and more 20 cruises in the mid-ocean region seamount areas respectively. All the information that is collected in these cruises is then is reported annually to the authority. The reports focus not only on the environmental studies, but also other activities related to resource assessment and technology development. And for these, the Legal and Technical Commission has also developed a series of digital templates to report the digital data and in a standardized way. We have just recently updated these templates. And the metadata template, geological data and environmental data. And we make the environmental data publicly available. There's also other types of data that are submitted to ISA, such as videos and images, raw data files and documents, and we call these unstructured data. And all this information is compiled in our recently launched deep data database. I mean, I say recently, but it's in fact more than 2 years now. So time is definitely flying. And yeah, this database has allowed us to compile and be able to standardize also the information that has been submitted over the years. There's also a number of other activities that we have been undertaking, especially concerning deep sea taxonomic standardization. These are some technical studies to inform on protocols for sampling, a series of workshops where taxonomists and researchers and contractors came together to compare their samples. And also in 2019, there was a workshop to review the biodiversity in the Clarion-Clipperton zone. We also heard yesterday of our great collaboration with MABIC and the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries of the Republic of Korea in supporting two recent workshops. The one last year, where we discussed collaborative approaches, and the most recent one that took place a couple of weeks ago, focusing on image-based taxonomy. And these two workshops were very important for allowing us to compile a series of activities and priorities that were identified regarding exchanging taxonomic data information, quality assurance and quality control, and also some activities related to improving sampling and data analysis. There are also a number of suggested approaches for enhancing capacity building and awareness raising. And we are compiling all these into a roadmap to be implemented in the coming years. So in brief, I'll just go over a couple of suggestions that are mentioned as approaches for improving the exchange of taxonomic data and information. And one of them is to create effective links between different databases. And the deep data database has recently been established as a node for the Ocean Biodiversity Information System of IOC UNESCO, and is also which also incorporates the standard nomenclature provided by the World Register of Marine Species. There's other relevant databases that can also be linked to these databases, and this would allow to enhance the access and sharing of these biodiversity data from the area. Other suggestions include creating different toolkits that would allow also to better share the information, for example, on how to identify species and provide field guides and tax checklists that can be accessible to the wider community, especially to the ones, to the communities studying these habitats, and as well as reference catalogs and annotation or video softwares are also other areas that can be standardized. In regard to quality assurance and quality control, there's some also relevant inputs from these workshops in the importance of accessing and sharing metadata information, the sampling locations, the persons that were involved in the sampling and where the samples are stored. There were very big stress on the importance of voucher specimens, and we've also heard in the past few days about or some of the challenges with maintaining these biological collections. Other aspects or initiatives that can help to maintain or ensure quality and control are those intercalibration exercises and periodic reviews of the data. For also quite relevant for this meeting, I think there's, I would also like to bring some of the suggestions that were put forward in regard to capacity building. So there's a series of training programs, e-learning materials, and also programs for exchange visits, for instance, that could be focused on taxonomy. And this was also very, stressed was the importance of bringing expert taxonomists together with the persons that are doing the identification. So there's a need to train more identifiers or para-taxonomists and also expert taxonomists. I also give here the link to the website of ISA, where where the different capacity building initiatives are listed and described in more detail. And my colleague Sonakshi will also address those tomorrow regarding to contractor training, internship programs, the access to the endowment fund for marine scientific research, and the ISA China Joint Training Research Center. One last thing that was also suggested, which I also think has been mentioned here, is the suggestion to have a centralized platform. This is also an idea that we would like to pursue, where we could, through this platform, make more effective links for sharing opportunities and the taxonomic resources, as well as enhancing deep sea literacy. Finally, to implement all these different activities and priorities, the ISA has designed the Sustainable Seabed Knowledge Initiative, which also has a component on taxonomic capacity, as well as stakeholder engagement. And I will be happy to provide more details on this initiative through which I'm sure we can discuss more ways to collaborate in the future. Okay, before I conclude my presentation, I would like to just recall the action plan that we need to focus on in the next few days. And in particular, during the breakout discussion regarding biological sampling, where we'll again recall the challenges and needs that have been identified, who are possible key actors and stakeholders and their potential contributions, and what are the approaches for collaboration that can enhance the generation and sharing of biological data. And we shall not forget the gender equity in our discussions throughout these topics. I give also an example based on some of the comments I made yesterday, and I think, we just heard earlier today on the importance of accessing and the facilities for enhancing DNA-based species identification. So there can be some phases of the process that, as if I understood correctly, are done in Fiji currently for the extraction and amplification, but then sequencing is done abroad. This is also very common in other countries, but we can discuss more and how we could use best facilities and improve those access to those resources, as well as training personnel. So this is just an example of how I think we can focus our discussions across the various challenges and needs that have been identified. And to finish on, hopefully everybody's still awake and I didn't bore you to death yet. So I would like to just finish giving you some smiley faces of me when I was on research cruises, and I'm showing you this mostly to highlight how when I started my studies, I really didn't think that I would be able to pursue these opportunities and to dive in the deep ocean. So for me, I think that this has been a very important step in my career, and I would like to, I'm happy to share more details on how I pursued those opportunities and how we can further inspire new students to have access to such opportunities. And with this, this is also how I build my pathway to the International Seabed Authority. I'm happy to now be inspiring more females to develop their careers in marine science and oceanography. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to continue our discussions and to share more experiences and opportunities with all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Luciana Zinio, for your wonderful presentation. I just want to just point out one thing, that there is some noise coming in. I think it's from your side, Dr. Zinio.
Yes, I do apologize. There was some background noise here, but I think it's you. Can you hear it still? I don't think so now, right?
Now it's okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. Yes, there was. I couldn't stop it.
It wasn't a big deal. I just want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah,
we can have the Q&A session for Dr. Luciana's presentation. So if any one of you have a question to Dr. Zinio, please raise your hand. And the secretary will give you floor.
I guess I was very clear, Dr. Mo, or there was a lot of information to digest, which I also understand.
Yes, your presentation was very clear, and then there were a lot of information. I agree that it'll take some time to digest. However,
yes, I think I would like to just mention that, of course, some of these methods and samplings that I went through are more appropriate for the exploration that is being taken offshore. There could be some similarities or some useful points to discuss in regard to the offshore fisheries work that it's also part of Fiji's activities at the moment in this sector. But what I think it's important is that it's not so much about, of course, the sampling tools need to be adapted for the various purposes, but there are very many common challenges that it doesn't matter if we are in the middle of the ocean or in coastal area, and that's what I think we have been discussing since yesterday, and in particular the standardization, sampling designs, how to integrate the data and information, the databases, linking databases. So all these topics are cross-cutting on various habitats and biological communities. So yeah, I'm happy to discuss this more. And I hope it was useful also to inspire some thoughts and ideas. Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Jinyu. Is there anyone who wants to take the floor?
To do that.
Oh yeah, Miss. Can I just call you Olivia? Your last name is quite difficult for me to pronounce, right? Okay, Olivia, please.
Can you hear me? Hello. Thank you so much for the information shared. This is really quite in details. Can you hear me clearly, Dr. Mo and Dr.
Yes.
Luciana?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Based on the information that you've explained, is for us, it's like quite a lot to digest for a few minutes of presentation. Just based on the biological preservation and data workflow, for simple, basic aquatic species that you have come across, how would you explain in a little bit of details for us to enable to understand? Because this way it would be best if you have done it practically to have the work that you have gone through it.
Yes,
I hope that's a bit clear.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a break, but I think I understood the question. To give some more or elaborate some more on the preservation and identification. Is that correct? Did I understand correct?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I think also it this discussion may also be quite useful maybe after Dr. Bach's presentation. He is also going to address some of these topics, but I think what maybe I went a little bit too fast is that obviously some of the or a lot of the work, the focus of the sampling that I described especially like with the sediments, for example, it's perhaps more different than the experiences that we've been hearing through the country reports so far. And what I understand, so what I would like to say is that in some cases, what happens is that we need to preserve the samples as a whole. So it's not like individual specimens that are already separated from the sediments. And sometimes what happens on board is that we basically would just use those piles of sieves that basically the sieving, I don't know if that's clear, but basically it's a way to sort the animals by different sizes. And then you can already put them in the containers already separated by sizes, but many cases you still haven't really been able to see all the animals. That requires a lot of more work that is done later on to go through under the microscope and go and pick all the different animals. And only when you have access to those individual animals, then starts the identification process in terms of being able to really see more the different characteristics. Of course, I'm talking more about the small organisms, because the bigger organisms, it's easier to pick and to take photographs and to observe more immediately. But still, depending on the numbers of specimens, a lot of that work then is done after the samples are taken to the labs inland. So I don't know if that was some of if I addressed the question, but in terms of the identification itself, then that is a whole new process or separate set of procedures that will have to compare the different animals, look through identification guides that describe the characteristics of the animals. And some of the challenges in particular for deep sea research is that there are many cases where those species are not yet described. So sometimes there are many new species to be described and to be identified. So it's perhaps slightly different from when you have or you're monitoring a particular fishery species where there's been already a good description and comparison and keeps being repeated over and over. We are not necessarily at that stage for some of the animals that are collected from these waters. I hope that addressed some of the concerns or question.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Is there any other participants who wish to take the floor for asking questions?
Dr. Mo, I see a comment on the chat, and I think it's from Miss Komal Devi. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yes, right. Yeah, you are right.
Okay, yes, I am happy to hear the question.
Thank you, ma'am. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am. I can hear you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Basically, it was more of the technological advancement that you have introduced us to. First time we have ever heard of this towed camera, remotely operated vehicles, and sea flow mappings, etc. And I think those technologies are not much available in Fiji. But what has captured my interest is on the slide that you mentioned about the research, strategic research priorities. The SRP3, which is on environmental sound technological innovations, and SRP4, which is on understanding environmental impacts. Ma'am, would you like to explain to us a bit further on how does this strategic research priorities work, and what are some of the things that are involved?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. And yes, I'm happy to say that yeah, we're at the moment we're starting to also develop some activities that are more focused on those priorities. So in terms of the technological development, the idea is to bring together key stakeholders that are involved in developing and using technology. In this case, not both or focusing on environmental sampling as well as resource assessment. But some of those technologies, and I think I did think also about this yesterday when we heard some of comments, is that we can also use or think about technologies that could help more remote sampling and long-term ocean observations. And I think this is also a topic that maybe we can discuss in more detail in our focused discussion. And the reason it came to my mind, it was because I heard yesterday that one of the challenges is the weather conditions, and how those weather conditions sometimes can be quite difficult to undertake time series or seasonal and seasonal sampling. Of course, this is a very difficult challenge to overcome, and it's also a challenge that it's also applies pretty much in all field work in marine science. So regardless where we are, there's these big conditions, and I've been lucky enough to be on board in times where things were not so bad, but there's been a few storms that I had to go through, and obviously the timing and the preparation of cruises and sampling surveys needs to take this into consideration. So what I think it is interesting is how also, or the discussion can be how we can maximize the use of technological assets. And like you said, there's some limitations in accessing also some of the examples that I gave, but I think there's at least the efforts are being so that there can be some collaborative programs and joint surveys so that in this case ISA contractors, but also the scientific communities can benefit from sharing access to these quite expensive and equipment. I guess the idea that I would pursue in terms of the Fiji or the discussions that we can take here, it would be in similar way, identifying the existing tools and the existing equipments, small boats, and other, access. I don't know. You can explain me more. What are the challenges or the needs, and how we can think about establishing collaborations for taking most use of those assets, but also think about how other sort of more regional and international programs can contribute to inform the status of the environment in Fiji. And I think those stations, and there's a number of other programs that we are also starting to connect with in terms of long-term ocean observations that can provide that data that then can be used also in a more local and regional scale. So it's definitely something that I will keep in my notes for our discussions in the next coming days. Oh, sorry, I think I missed the SRP4. That's more in terms of environmental impact or related to environmental impacts. And for that, what we also, I mean, it's slightly related to what I just said. I think the idea is to identify also knowledge gaps in baseline conditions, and in particular in aspects related to, for example, underwater noise and baseline levels of pollutants that we would need to understand better what's the status to try to also be able to assess what are the impacts of the activities in the area and also cumulative impacts. And here again, I just another point to make is baseline to also understand climate change related impacts. So which I think can also be something we can discuss later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chinio, and thank you, Ms. Komal. And I think I can take one more question from Flora on Dr. Chinio's presentation. Oh, here, Ms. Natadra.
Hi, hello again. If it's difficult for you to say my second name, just call out my first name, Chelly. Anyways, thank you so much, Dr. Luciano, for your very informative presentation and lecture. I guess for most of us, we've gone to university. Most of us, I believe, had backgrounds in science, marine science, applied science, and so we have a bit of pre-existing knowledge and basic understanding of at least, I could say, 40 to 50% of the content of your presentation, madam. But instead, I've personally found some very interesting details within your presentation this morning, and I've seen in your presentation that marine bioresources encompasses generally a big area of study, and it's not just like for me personally. I was always thinking that because maybe because I work for fisheries, I only understand biological sampling of tuna species. But with your presentation this morning, I've able to know that there's a big world out there, and there are more to scientific research than what we have or what we are doing right now. And it sort of like opens up my understanding as well, and also I've seen that we have maybe techniques and tools already in place at the national level. Like for fisheries, we have biological sampling programs, but it's only in the tuna fisheries sector, and and it's mainly to look at population dynamics and understanding the biology of the different tuna species that we target in not just in our EEZs, but in the region, in the Western and Central Pacific Ocean as well, madam. So most of your the techniques or the sampling techniques that you highlighted are just interesting, and I'm just interested to hear from you. Is it something that we could probably use, maybe develop what we have already here in terms of the tools that we have in the biological sampling program of our tuna species? What are your advices on that in terms of developing it further to look at other areas of, because you've also mentioned the existing tools that we have that we could develop further. I'm interested to hear of your maybe insights on that.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much for your question. And I think, yes, you just helped me also to clarify the earlier question from Miss Olivia. I think the main point I wanted to make when we are, and I think this is exactly what you just described, is whether we consider biological sampling in more like a population level or community level. Right, and this is the difference of, I think what I described falls really much into what we call the ecosystem-based approach, where we describe more the different communities. What I've been listening from your reports over the past days falls more, like you say, in very targeted species or specific populations. And yes, those are very big differences, right? That they are not necessarily, they are very complementary. So what I described that more or on those community or describing the diversity, abundances and so forth of the different animals, is one side of understanding the community, but obviously we also need certain focus studies, for example, at the species level, like you're doing for the tuna fish, the tuna fisheries. If we want to understand the specific level of tolerance for let's say, of one organism or one species, how it tolerates an increase in temperature or an increase in or a decrease in oxygen or an increase in metals, how it, for example, would develop its toxic levels. So I think that's that. What I would like to say is that many of the methodologies that I described that are applied in the that we are seeing and applying in the deep sea can also be applied in coastal area. Obviously, there are different things to consider, but for example, video surveys is something that can be transferable as in terms of the process and how you interpret the videos, how you define transects for estimating the distribution of the species in using video cameras, for example. And I didn't mention in my presentation, but some of these tools that I showed that are, yes, quite, it's not so easy to have access to these instruments, right? But there are also quite a number of developments in producing cheaper versions of these equipments, and I think the discussions that we can also have in terms of that technology development and how these equipments can also become more affordable and more accessible It's something that I would like to bring. I'm just thinking that I recently heard about a low-cost video camera that can basically be used in a very small boat. So you don't really need to be on a big vessel with a big crane to lower a big camera system, but there are some developments that are taking place to make this equipment more handy also. And that's also been some of the work that I was doing before coming to ISA, is to find some solutions for distributing sort of low-cost systems that can be applicable in a wider context. So I think this is also very good question. I heard earlier that there's still some challenging understanding and assessing biodiversity in general in Fiji. So definitely some of this, we can continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zinio. We have another question from the floor. Ms. Olivia. Please give the floor to Ms. Olivia. Ms. Olivia, are you still there with hands on?
Humble apologies, something went wrong with my audio.
Okay.
I'm using Mary Elisoni's line.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
All right.
Okay.
It'll be just a quick one. It's not a question, it's just a comment. Yes, I really enjoyed this topic on biological sampling, and so in biosecurity perspective, we engage in the export and import of live aquatic species that coming into and out of the country. And this is something that my colleague and I will really like to discuss further with our management and our technical team in terms of having our own marine lab. And we're doing inspections in the field, and the sampling is something that we haven't done on the species that has been imported and exported, but rely on other organizations, stakeholders like Ministry of Fisheries and SPC and USP to do it for us. But by going through this presentation, it gives that clear picture that it's something that we need to, in a biosecurity perspective, that we will need to see this in a long-term plan, that we will need to engage ourselves on the field of work on aquatic species, because we're exporting from Fiji to UK and other countries in the world, and we also need to have the the health status, and not only rely on the veterinarians to do the job. So since we're here for the training, it's an eye opener, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for this topic on biological sampling, and we hope to continue on with the other topics related to this training program. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Yes, and yeah, very important topic again that you're bringing up. So yeah, let's continue in this topic in the next few days.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we had enough. I mean, we can go on, but we had enough conversation on Dr. Zinio's presentation, and it was very fruitful. And now I like to turn on to the the next topic for rest of 10 minutes about how we are going to relate this topic to the action plan. So if anyone have questions, or you can raise a hand, like you can ask Dr. Zinio, such as how would you write action plan if you were one of us? Or maybe did you have any experience like this? Or maybe you can ask Dr. Genius' experience in International Seabed Authority. For example, let me remind you the key elements of action plan development. Probably Dr. Jinyu can give you idea who would be the key actors or stakeholders, and then what kind of approaches for collaboration Dr. Jinyu had used for her career. Or you can also ask something like what would be the challenges or in establishing leadership in her career. And I'm just raising the examples, and the question is all yours. Thank you.
We can ask questions.
Oh, Ms. Komal, are you asking
Yes,
for
sir.
the floor? Okay, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, please take the floor, Ms. Komal.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, ma'am. This is something we wanted to share our experience with you, and also learn from your experience, especially when you talked about action plans and stuff. So as part of Water Authority of Fiji, we are trying to implement a policy on liquid trade waste. And this is basically on discharging the industrial waste into the receiving waters. I mean, not into the receiving waters, but into WEF wastewater system, which then later discharges into the ocean. So in doing so, we did form collaboration with other stakeholders, such as the local government, which consists of the town councils. Like Fiji, we have different towns and cities, and each is governed by their own municipal terms and conditions. So we formed that collaboration with the town councils, also with Department of Environment, Ministry of Health, and we also involved the business sectors, which was some of the associations that are available that are in Fiji. So, for example, Fiji Hotel Association. Then we have the Fiji business associations, which different groups, I mean, different areas have the different business association groups, things like that. And we also did a lot of awareness in terms of what is this, liquid waste, what is the environmental impacts, the public health impacts and things like that. So that's like that. Those were our stakeholders. That's how we went about doing that. And as Mr. Young has explained, that you have a lot of experience in this sector, and our Sanita and I, we have been involved greatly in this. Like, we have conducted around 200 presentations to business sectors just to educate them on the importance and why. Because at the end of the day, there is the three areas that we're looking after is the environment, the public health, and our wastewater infrastructure. So we would like to know if how we can improve this and how we can manage this better.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. I may have now, I think it's my time to say that I may have to take some time to think about it as well. In terms of, my experience, I may also ask other colleagues of mine, in particular Miss Lee, to also give some input on this, as my experience is not as extensive as hers. I think, but like you say, I mean, it is important, and I think that's what we've been doing, is also trying to think how we can bridge the communication between the various interested actors and stakeholders in finding the solutions for the different problems. I guess in this case, it's a very specific topic that you're addressing, but I think in terms of methodologies to do that, I don't think it's that easy. So I think it is definitely small steps of, like you say, through presentations, through bringing more, maybe policy briefs, preparing materials that can be read by different audiences and be targeted for these different audiences, and try to also understand how they also are interested in finding the solution. What is the incentive also? I think that is something that I keep that we also keep hearing and thinking is what is the incentive for the different potential actors and stakeholders to be involved and to be willing to contribute. So I think this is something that the message needs to keep in mind in terms of trying to engage the different groups. So I guess if I speak about my experience, which is, I would say, relatively short in the intergovernmental process that I started since I joined the International Seabed Authority no longer than 3 years ago. So it's still a growing experience. And I'm happy to also ask my colleague June if she's here and she would like to give any insight in this. But I think we can definitely think about more your question and come up with some more inputs as we discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Luciana. If I can jump in, Dr. Mo. So I want to first clarify, ISA's mandate is the area beyond national jurisdiction. So we are kind of in an awkward position, but I will use my previous life's experience, because I've been working also in the East Asia area for integrated coastal management. And the question you are addressing is exactly about the coastal management, especially focusing on the pollution issues, as you mentioned, liquid waste. So, but in any planning process or management process is following common kind of elements or steps. First, you identify problems. You have various stakeholders, but they should have a common understanding about problems and issues. In this case, liquid waste. And then through the engagement of local scientists and also local experts and engineers, you'd find various policy measures and tools and approaches. And during that process, maybe you have to do some environmental profiling and also consultation with the stakeholders who is producing pollution, and also what kind of marine resources are being affected. Maybe there has been complaint from the fishermen, local fishermen, or tourism sector. Maybe that was kind of a starting point why government has to give attention for this issue, or maybe there could be health issues, a public health issue. So usually those issues require multi kind of stakeholders consultation process, and also when identify the approaches, how the management approaches, also it requires different approaches, not only technological approaches, but also various political policy approaches. And then maybe you need to improve the legal framework, or sometimes institutional framework. You need to set up a monitoring scheme. So it is really requiring integrated approaches for the management of coastal area and interacting, managing the human activities, and how we can prevent any adverse impacts from the human activity in the coastal land to the also marine resources, and also the activities, the human activities taking place, like coastal tourism, in the ocean. And of course, when you have all these management tools, you put this into a plan, and then this plan has to be approved by the government, and then it would require some type of political opportunity, and then find also budget, operational budget within the government. So all this process, problem identification, also finding out policy tools and approaches, and also finding the most appropriate political environment or opportunity for the approval process is it can be applied to your action planning that we are doing it here, which is more focusing on biodiversity. So just question yourself, okay, you have been worried so far, liquid waste. Why do you have to worry about it? Because it is affecting, it is affecting public health, also one of the reasons, but then it is affecting the marine biodiversity, when it enters your coastal water. But then do we know enough about marine biodiversity, in terms of the value? How much do we know about it? I think that is the starting point. So that's why the focus in this workshop is more about knowing what you have, knowing the ecological or biological value. It doesn't even go to the ecological value, but more focusing on the biological value of your marine waters. And then how we can collect the information, how we can compile that information, and how we can standardize it so that it can be shared, and it can be a valuable information to support the management. Because what if somebody says, for example, we used to, in Korea, we had a very valuable tidal mudflat. But then when there was no information about the biodiversity value, people used to call it wasteland. But then the wetland is not wasteland. Wetland is really the full of all the biodiversity, and it is the source for all the fish productivity. So the lack of science or lack of knowledge can really lead mismanagement of our marine resources, and we may lose important value without even knowing that we are losing it. So the focus of this workshop is not really handling the impact side or the impact or stress side, but it is more focusing on the recipient side of a marine biodiversity. And and also how, and even for that, this really goes to the deep fundamental side of identifying species and then who they are. And it doesn't even go yet to what is their function yet. So this workshop is really to identify who they are and also how we can standardize the approaches and how we can generate those data about biodiversity and how we can also share those data. So it's really the fundamental step about knowing the marine biodiversity, another the creature in the water with better. And by doing that, we can have a better scientific knowledge to have our integrated coastal management in a more meaningful way, because then we will have a more the stronger scientific foundation to argue against why we need to make management measures to reduce the pollution input. So this goes to the other side, but then the planning process, when we talk about action planning, identifying the problem. So in this case, your issues is maybe the country capacity, your institution's capacity. Now you are maybe focusing on tuna, but can we expand so that we can have a more expanded knowledge about marine biodiversity? Then how can we do that? So Luciana shared some examples how we can use some of the handy equipment to have a better knowledge. Then how can you access maybe use that information to raise awareness, your stakeholders, so that your minister or your politician can understand better that the Fiji need to understand marine biodiversity in a more wider manner, not only focusing on commercially important fish species. So, and then how can, and you also, I heard that there are WWF and also SPC, then how can we put these different actors together? How can maybe the Ministry of Fisheries or other Ministry of Environment can create a forum? Because in many cases, also Ministry of Fisheries and Ministry of Environment, they don't share the information. And when the Ministry of Fisheries people go to the sea, yes, they have a boat, but then they only collect the sample related to fishery management. Many cases, Ministry of Environment people, they don't have a boat, but their mandates are collecting maybe water samples or more related environment. Do they talk and do they really complement their expertise so that overall the Fiji can have a better idea about their marine waters, marine biological value as a whole? So as a big ocean state. So I think that's the focus here. But your example is excellent, and it kind of maybe explain what are the planning process we have to go through. Just remember 3P: programs, policy tools, and then political environment. So for political environment, we need a good communication, stakeholders, environment, partnership. Political tools, you need to learn from various examples, and also programs, you need to also have a common understanding among stakeholders that not knowing enough your marine biodiversity is a problem, because we have to start from there. So I will stop here and we can continue have this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your informative and inspiring statement. I really appreciate that. And I see Miss Jianti Singh waiting for the floor. Could you
Hello,
give us?
Mr. Yang. Yes.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, my question, Dr. Lee has answered some of the things from the question, but I just wanted to know the general, that you guys have known that from our country presentations that we're only doing biological sampling for tuna species and in small quantity for aquaculture species. And we don't have this biological sampling for deep sea organisms and environment. So I just wanted to know from Dr. Genio, what would be her suggestions for the action plan if we are developing, because we're not doing anything in that area. So just her advice on the action plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Fiji must have also national policy and strategy for the ocean management. And I would start with that because Fiji must be also the party to the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity. And then they have been making efforts for implementing also toward achieving Aichi biodiversity target. And also now they are under negotiation for the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And of course, Fiji also must be discussing how to establish marine protected areas. So I would start with those policy framework, take a look, and you must have also national biodiversity strategies and action plan, and then there must be some marine section. So I would start with the policy framework that has been already approved by the policymakers. So it means there is a political commitment. And then as a more professionals and as a more technical experts, you can start saying, what are the information that would be needed to support this policy commitment? I would start from there. Then it means you are starting from the political commitment, and it's much easier to convince your minister and then your political leaders. So then you come up with a list of information that you need, and then find the ways how you can improve capacity, building on existing capacity, and also how you can use existing equipment more effectively, how you can align the collaboration with the among different ministry, and also how you can use even the available financial resources more effectively to achieve those global biodiversity goals and targets that Fiji is already committed to. And also I know that like as in the SPREP, also they have some direction. I mean, these days at ISA, I'm not familiar with those updated policy framework, but then I'm sure there is a lot of policy document and then framework that has been approved by ministers and then government leaders. And I would go back to those statements and start from there, and then find out how you can improve your biodiversity monitoring or research to support that policy. I will stop here, but maybe Luciana, would you like to also address that? This is a very important question also.
Yes, thank you for the question, and thank you, June, for addressing it. I think I have very little to add on that, but yes, so it's trying to find. I think it's also the commonalities that can be applied, not necessarily that you would have to now shift the focus of what has been done or what is the interest, but like Ms. Lee said, is identifying what is the vision for the future in terms of the commitments that are being made, and how you can maximize your assets and expertise to be able to develop in those directions. So I think I will stop from here, but yes, thank you for that important question.
Thank you very much for the excellent questions and also excellent answers. I really appreciate. We can go on, but I think the our teas are waiting for the participants. So we better stop here to make participants enjoy the tea prepared by Koika Physio Office. So we'll have a tea break for 10 minutes. So we will come back at 2:45 in Fiji time. Thank you.
Dr. Mo, are you sending us tea also to Jamaica?
I'll do my
It's
best.
already 2:45. It's already 2:45.
I'm sorry. 2:55.
2:55. All right.
Okay. Okay, make it through. See you.
Enjoy your
We'll meet again.
Yes, enjoy your tea.
안녕하십니까. 코이카 연수사업실장 조형래입니다. 이렇게 영상을 통해 여러분을 만나 뵙게 되어 대단히 반갑습니다. 코이카는 지난해 처음으로 온라인 방식 연수를 도입했습니다. 이를 통해 코로나19로 국가 간 이동이 자유롭지 않은 제약을 극복하고 한국의 개발 경험을 함께 공유할 수 있었습니다. 코로나19의 영향이 여전한 올해에도 디지털 컨택을 통해 여러분들과 다시 만나게 되었습니다. 온라인 교육이 목표한 성과를 거두기 위해서는 무엇보다도 연수생 여러분의 적극적인 참여가 가장 중요합니다. 코이카와 연수기관도 세심하게 준비해서 여러분들이 보람과 즐거움을 함께 얻을 수 있도록 최선을 다하겠습니다. 연수생 여러분, 코이카는 4가지 핵심 가치를 가지고 있습니다. People, Peace, Prosperity, Planet, 즉 4P가 바로 그것입니다. 사람 중심의 평화와 번영을 위한 개발 협력을 실천하고 기후, 환경과 같은 글로벌 이슈 해결에 기여하고자 하며 그 중심에 여러분이 있습니다. 우리 글로벌 연수 사업이 여러분 국가에서 이 4가지 가치가 실현되는 데 기여할 수 있으리라 믿습니다. 여러분은 여러분 나라의 발전을 이끌어 나갈 주역이십니다. 코이카는 여러분의 노력과 열정을 항상 응원하고 여러분이 각자의 역량을 향상시켜 여러분 국가의 번영에 기여할 수 있도록 최선을 다하겠습니다. 마지막으로 코로나19로 인해 많은 어려움이 있으시겠지만 이를 잘 극복해내시기를 바라고 코이카의 연수 프로그램이 여러분께 많은 도움이 되기를 기대합니다. 감사합니다.
연수 참가자 여러분 안녕하십니까? 저는 코이카 연수사업실 김우영입니다. 지금부터 여러분께 코이카 및 연수사업을 소개해 드리겠습니다. 첫 번째, 코이카를 간략히 소개해 드리겠습니다. 두 번째, 씨앗이라는 브랜드명을 가진 코이카의 연수사업을 소개해 드리겠습니다. 세 번째, 씨앗 사업의 성과는 어떤 것들이 될 수 있는지 말씀드리겠습니다. 마지막으로 씨앗 사업의 성공을 위해 여러분들의 어떤 참여가 필요한지 말씀드리겠습니다. 코이카는 1991년 한국의 ODA 사업을 수행하기 위해 설립됐습니다. 1차적으로는 협력국의 빈곤 감소를 위해 함께 노력하고 있고, 나아가서는 한국과 협력국의 상생 발전에 필요한 사업들을 실시하고 있습니다. 아프리카 16개소, 중동 3개소, 중앙아시아 3개소, 아시아 태평양 14개소, 중남미 8개소, 총 44개의 코이카 사무소가 있습니다. 국가가 발전하려면 다양한 분야의 전방위 발전이 필요합니다. 그렇기 때문에 코이카와 협력국이 협력할 수 있는 지점도 무궁무진하다고 할 수 있습니다. 연수사업, 즉 씨앗 사업도 코이카와 협력국이 국가 발전을 위해 협력하는 여러 형태 중 하나입니다. 코이카 사업의 예시를 몇 가지 살펴보겠습니다. 코이카와 한국과학기술연구원은 베트남 과학기술부와 협력해 2014년부터 2020년까지 3,500만 불 규모 예산으로 V키스트 연구원 건축, 연구장비 설치, 연구원 운영방안 컨설팅, 공동심업연구, 연구인력 역량 강화, 연구원 운영 지원 등을 추진했습니다. 우즈베키스탄에서는 식품, 식수, 매개 전염성 질병 관리 역량 강화를 위해 한국 전문가를 파견해 우즈베키스탄 역학 전문가 대상 현지 교육을 실시하고 미생물 기생충 실험실 기자재를 지원했습니다. 미생물 및 기생충 실험실 전문가 및 실무자 대상 초청 연수를 통해 연구인력 역량을 강화시켰으며 사마르칸트 지역에서 포충증 관리 시범 사업을 실시해 해당 지역에서 포충 완전 퇴치의 성과를 냈습니다. 가나에서는 삼성전자, 독일의 원조기관 GIZ와 협력해 전자정비 직업훈련원을 설립해 여성 전자정비사를 육성하고 있습니다. 매년 여성 졸업생을 100명 이상 배출하고 있습니다. 2012년 공인된 전자정비 분야 직업교육 과정의 여성 졸업생 비율이 3%였던 것에 반해 2017년에는 25%로 증가했습니다. 월드 프렌즈 코리아는 한국 정부에서 파견되는 해외 봉사단원을 말합니다. 고등학생부터 퇴직자까지 일반 봉사단, 프로젝트 봉사단, 코이카 UMV 봉사단, NGO 봉사단 등 다양한 형태의 봉사단 프로그램이 있습니다. 2009년부터 지금까지 6만 명 넘게 협력국으로 파견됐습니다. 이상 코이카에 대해서 간단히 설명을 드렸습니다. 씨앗은 한국어로 씨앗을 의미합니다. 동시에 Capacity Improvement and Advancement for Tomorrow의 약자이기도 합니다. 연수 과정을 통해 여러분께서 갖게 되는 새로운 지식과 기술은 우리의 최종 목표가 아닙니다. 오히려 한국과 여러분 국가의 상생 발전을 위한 첫 단계라고 생각해 주시기 바랍니다. 이런 배경에서 코이카 연수 사업의 브랜드명을 씨앗이라고 지었습니다. 55개국의 약 8만 3천 명이 씨앗 사업을 수료했습니다. 지금까지 92.5%의 만족도를 기록하고 있습니다. 확률적으로 여러분의 만족도도 상당히 높을 것이란 얘기겠네요. 하지만 아직 7.5%만큼 개선의 여지가 있다는 뜻이기도 합니다. 씨앗 사업에 참여하시면서 개선에 대한 아이디어가 있으신 분은 설문조사에 의견을 꼭 남겨주십시오. 역량 강화 사업은 전체 개발 협력 사업에서 노란 부분을 차지합니다. 여러분은 작게는 여러분 소속기관에, 크게는 여러분 국가에 변화를 일으키는 주체가 될 것입니다. 여러분이 소속기관과 국가에 더 잘 변화를 일으킬 수 있도록 씨앗 사업은 다음에 3가지 특징을 갖고 있습니다. 첫째, 연수과정 하나하나마다 맞춤형으로 기획했다는 것입니다. 협력국이 스스로 진단하고 제시한 프로그램 개요서에 따라 한국의 가장 적합한 연수기관을 선정해 프로그램을 구체화했습니다. 둘째, 단순 일방향의 지식 전수가 아니라 양방향의 지식 공유라는 점입니다. 국가들은 저마다 국가 발전에 고유한 맥락을 갖고 있습니다. 어느 한 나라의 경험이 다른 나라에서도 똑같이 성공할 것이라 생각하는 것은 위험합니다. 씨앗 사업은 한국과 협력국, 협력국과 다른 협력국, 동일 협력국의 연수 참가자끼리 전방위 지식을 공유할 수 있는 장입니다. 셋째, 씨앗 사업은 성과를 내는 데 집중합니다. 씨앗 사업에서 여러분이 얻게 될 새로운 경험, 지식, 기술은 사업 성과로 변환되지 않으면 시간의 흐름에 따라 흩어져 버리게 됩니다. 사업의 효과가 지속될 수 있도록 씨앗 사업은 처음부터 끝까지 성과를 내는 데 집중합니다. 연수과정 종료는 씨앗 사업의 끝이 아닙니다. 수립한 액션 플랜을 실제 현업에 적용하고 현업 적용에 장애물이 있을 때 이를 극복하기 위한 사후관리 사업을 실시하는 것까지가 씨앗 사업입니다. 스리랑카 범죄 수사 역량 강화 과정의 사례입니다. 모범 사례를 일반 사례와 비교했을 때 가장 차이 나는 점은 이렇습니다. 연수과정 종료 후 참가자들이 학습 내용을 현업에 적용하기 위해 계속 노력했다는 점입니다. 처음 이 과정의 산출물은 액션 플랜 한 건이었습니다. 그러나 귀국 후 소관부처에 이 액션 플랜을 보고했고 가이드라인을 수립 및 배포해 연수에 참여하지 않았던 동료들에게도 학습 내용을 전파했습니다. 그 결과 학습 내용이 충분히 전파된 기반 위에서 범죄 수사 규정을 개정할 수 있었고 덕분에 미제 사건을 해결했습니다. 말 그대로 씨앗 사업은 씨앗이었고 참가자들이 이 씨앗을 잘 길러낸 것입니다. 규정을 개선하고 미제 사건을 해결하는 것만이 연수 사업의 성과라고 생각해서 질에 부담을 느끼실 필요는 없습니다. 연수에 성실히 참여해 참가자의 역량이 강화되는 것, 이에 따라 참가자의 소속기관 역량이 강화되는 것, 그리고 한국과 협력국의 우호가 발전되는 것도 모두 씨앗 사업의 성과입니다. 사후관리 현장 사업은 액션 플랜의 현업 적용을 위해 코이카가 협력국 현장에 지원하는 소규모 프로젝트입니다. 6개월, 약 5만 불 규모입니다. 연수과정에 성실히 참여하시는 분은 연수과정 종료즈음 액션 플랜 한 건을 수립하시게 될 것입니다. 수립한 액션 플랜의 추진을 소속기관, 관계부처와 논의해 주십시오. 액션 플랜 수립 때는 미처 생각하지 못했던 부분들이 추진 단계에서 드러날 수도 있습니다. 연수기관과 논의해 액션 플랜을 현실에 맞게 한 번 더 보완해 주십시오. 보완된 액션 플랜 중 우수한 것들을 대상으로 코이카가 사후관리 현장 사업을 진행할 것입니다. 에세이 작성같이 비교적 쉽고 빠르게 참여할 수 있는 프로그램도 있습니다. 연수에 참여하며 새로운 것들을 보고 느끼실 것입니다. 하지만 기록을 남기지 않으면 우리는 그것들을 잊게 됩니다. 잊어버리기에 여러분의 생각과 경험은 너무나도 소중합니다. 글로 남겨서 한국의 기관들, 그리고 여러분 뒤에 연수에 참여할 많은 참가자들과 나눌 수 있기를 바랍니다. 이미 코이카 동창회에 대해 들어본 분도 계시고 그렇지 않은 분도 계실 것입니다. 연수 과정을 수료하면 여러분은 코이카 동창회원이 되십니다. 동창회 활동을 통해 코이카 현지 사무소와 계속 관계를 유지해 주시고 지역사회에 변화를 일으키는 주체가 되시고 또 여러분 이후에 연수를 참여하는 분들에게 귀중한 조언을 부탁드립니다. 온라인 네트워킹도 중요합니다. 유튜브 씨앗TV를 통해 연수 사업의 더 많은 모습을 보여드릴 것입니다. 유튜브에서 씨앗TV를 검색하시고 좋아요와 구독 부탁드립니다. 이제 마지막입니다. 연말이 되면 올해 연수에 참여했던 모든 참가자들을 대상으로 팔로우업 설문조사를 실시합니다. 응답률이 높을수록 올해 씨앗 사업의 공과를 정확하게 평가하고 다음 연도의 씨앗 사업을 보다 많이 개선할 수 있습니다. 꼭 짬을 내어 설문에 응답해 주십시오. 지식 확산 활동 등 여타 협력을 위해 연수기관 코이카 사무소와도 함께 해주십시오. 이상으로 코이카 및 연수사업 소개를 마치겠습니다. 경청해 주셔서 감사합니다.
Good afternoon. I hope you all enjoy the tea break. I see some of our colleagues are still enjoying, so I just take a few moments and then we can start a little bit slowly. Okay, this session is for taxonomy, and then the Dr. Jinuk Beck. Dr. Beck, can you wave your hand? Okay. he prepared the presentation, and then I'm going to lead this session as his interpreter. So if your answer, just give us a little more time between your question and the answers. Okay. So if everyone is ready, we'll begin the presentation. Dear participants, let me begin my presentation. My name is Jin-Uk Baek. Today, I'm going to touch on identification and description in taxonomy. Today's focus is, what is taxonomy? We can't learn everything about taxonomy today, but I'd like to share the basic idea why we do taxonomy and why do research on species. And later, I'd like to talk about the process of identification and how we do description. Definition of taxonomy. The term taxonomy is composed of two words, taxis, which means arrangement, and nomos, which means law. So together, it means the law to arrange. So it means to arrange and to name it. As a similar term, systematics and classification and we use identification. However, these are slightly different terms. Let me compare taxonomy with systematics. Taxonomy is about grouping and naming, but systemics are about defining relationship between species. Concept of species. Species are fundamental component in taxonomy. However, the definition of the species are different. We have 26 different definitions of taxonomy. However, I'd like to talk about 3 definitions today. First, biospecies, which are a group of species actually or potentially interbreeding is possible. And second, ecospecies. Ecospecies is based on population. These are one who compete each other. But these are very hard to differentiate from other species from other regions. So taxonomy uses ecospecies as a background information, but do not focus on this. Third, morphospecies is one distinctive morphological character. This is the method taxonomist uses because it is easy to differentiate. Taxon. A taxon is taxonomic unit. This is a unit of any rank. If we say a class can be a taxon. Also, grade can be a taxon. Species, genus, family can be a taxon. Group with a distinctive feature can be a taxon. From now on, I'd like to talk about identification. Identification. Here, I'd like to, if I want to get a benthos, the first method is diving. In my case, I dive to gas sediments. Second, using a graph from the vessel. Especially in Yellow Sea in Korea, the site is very limited. Sometimes it's shorter than 0.1 meter. Then we grab the sediments and get back to the lab. Let me show you how Mavic researchers conduct the sampling in the coastal zone. Now you see Dr. Beck. This is the night trap one of our colleagues are using. This is the species we captured from the night trap. Okay, this is organs. The organs showing in the presentation is called male fauna. I think the Dr. Zinio already mentioned about the size. The male fauna is benthic organism that pass through a sieve mesh size of 1,000 micrometers, the upper limit, and are retained on a sieve mesh size of 45 micrometer or 63 micrometer as a lower limit. So this is what you can see in the presentation is a living organism, right from the sediments from the ocean. And usually this is not visible with naked eyes, so we use microscope. Here I'd like to show how to process the sediments. We use alcohol or formaldehyde for fixation. And the main reason for rinsing is get rid of the mud and sediments so we can see better.
supposed to get along. Please do not expect me to wrap it up and keep it there. The observation I'm doing could easily be understood. A cynical demeanor, but one of us misread. What do you know? It happened again. A friend is not a means you utilize to get somewhere. Somehow didn't notice friendship is an end. What do you know? It happened again. How come no one told me all throughout history? The loneliest people were the ones who always spoke the truth, the ones who made a difference by withstanding indifference. I guess it's up to me now. Should I take that risk or just smile?
After rinsing, you can see better. As you see, there are the species. So with a better vision, we can sort out these species. And then, as you can see, on in the middle of the upper pillar is Harpaticoida. This is the species and of a main field of my research. And from here, I can show the process of identification little by little. And then first, with a better vision, I usually start from sort out in high level, such as phylum or order. You can say it is a sorting by a big group. Let me show you how I identify the Harpaticoida. The next step is check the reference. The reference will give you morphology and character you are looking for. As you can see, my identification is going low level from kingdom to species little by little. In my case, I usually go to order level by using the reference. To find the family, I use 3 references on the right side. This shows the reference I just mentioned. Number 1 explains morphological character. The number 2 shows the drawing in case it is drawing, in case it is very difficult to describe in writing. So we use writing and drawing together. Now I identify the Tegastidae at a family level by using a reference. Now I'm trying to identify genus and the species level. This is the key for the identification. This shows the level of identification process. If your sample meets number 1, P2-P3, XBAR3 segmented, then you go to the P2-P3 endopods, 2 segmented. then you find your sample is Awella. Here, let me show how I identified and recorded the details. People ask me why I draw rather than taking pictures. The answer is drawing can express three-dimensional and more details, and I like to draw. These are my drawings. The red lines and marks are something different from recorded spaces. So, which means this is a new species. This is a new species I have found. Description. From now on, let me move on to the topic of a description. Description is to translate the drawing into letters. Drawing gives us instant ideas, but we need record in writing to produce exact information. This description is to find something which is different. As you see, we mark the distinctive features. These are how we translate. Excuse me. Okay, here we use electron microscope to see the features and structures if a high power microscope cannot detect. These are how we translate into writings. Once you found a new species, you need to update the key to species. Lately, we start to use DNA sequences. However, this is just supplementary information to define species, at least in my field. Biogeographic data is also important. We also add the biogeographic data to new species. But this is not the end. We deposit the specimen to the repository for good. So other researchers or next generation can also do the research too. Moreover, for the further study, they can borrow the specimen. Summary. Species appears but also disappears. We keep the record of a species and find out why it appeared and disappeared. This is why we study taxonomy and to keep all the record. To create the library of life, we classify all the species. We taxonomists give the names to the species because we respect them. Thank you very much, and please let me know if there is any question. Thank you. Thank you very much, and I hope my translation was okay. And if you have any question, let me deliver to Dr. Beck, and then I deliver back to you. I don't see any hands on so far. So maybe you can also ask a question regarding to the action plan. You don't have to limit your question only to the on presentation.
Dr. Mo, there is a hand by Gianti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Singh, please.
Yes, Mr. Yang. I have a question on action. Uh,
My apologies. I think we have some connection problem, so I couldn't really get what you just said.
Mr. Yang, sorry, my Zoom just collapsed. I had a question on action plan. In your previous presentation, you had it's written there 3 groups. So are we going to be randomly divided in 3 groups to do the action plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Singh. I'm not going to divide the group randomly. First, I'm going to ask you your preference, and if I cannot make the balance between the number of members between groups, then I'll divide based on the numbers of each group. First, I'm going to respect your preference.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I see Koika 16.
Hello, Bola, that's Miss Sanita Ratu. Just a question. Before this presentation, we heard Dr. Luciana talking about the sampling and preservation and the methods they used. So when it comes to taxonomy, Dr. Beck, do you identify species based on their significance around the marine area, or you name or you identify all of them? Did you get my question, sir?
Sure, I got it. 아니면 전부 다 그냥 하는지. Thank you for waiting. According to Dr. Beck, so far, the National Marine Biodiversity has not done all the research even within Korean waters. So at this moment, what we are doing, we are covering all the Korean waters, and we do not have any specific area, or we consider there are some important area. So we are covering or surveying all Korean waters. Is that what you're asking?
Actually, but for all the species that you collect, do you identify
them? I see. Okay, now I got it. Or
it's just the species that of like some kind of significance within the.
어떻게 하세요? Thank you for your question. Once we collect the species, we do taxonomy, we identified as much as we can. But unfortunately, even though Mavic has quite a number of taxonomies, we cannot cover all the species we collected. So I think Dr. Beck's answer was, we identified species as much as we can, which means according to our capacity of the
All right.
taxonomist. Thank you.
Because I wanted to ask, are there any challenges why you can't like identify all the species, but it's up to your capacity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Jacqueline, please.
Thank you, sir. I just have a question on collaboration between Fiji and Korea, specifically Mavic, in terms of strengthening taxonomy within Fiji, especially with the Ministry of Fisheries. What are some opportunities that are there for some of our staff to undergo trainings with your trained taxonomists?
That's great question, in fact, and but at the same time, that's really difficult for me to answer the question right now. But so far, as our vice president mentioned, this is our first collaboration. I mean, at Mavic's level, this is our first collaboration with Fiji. So we haven't had any chance to, for example, as you mentioned, the training program for taxonomy with Fiji has not been established yet. But since Mavic has very excellent taxonomists, is 25 or 26, so I think that we can make a very good opportunity to establish a training program, and I think that's also be great training program for Fiji side, but at the same time, that's also a great opportunity for Mavic taxonomists who can apply their knowledge, and I think so it can be capacity building program for each side. And then I'm really looking forward to it, but I don't think I can give you like a answer right now, but I can say I'm really looking forward to it. Can I give the floor to Madam Chair right now?
Yes, Jacqueline, I think that's a very, very interesting point, because since I'm not Mavi and I'm not from COICA, maybe I have a liberty to say that, but I'd like to suggest that maybe this point should be included in the action plan. If you remember the video that was played during the tea time, I can see that COICA is giving a lot of importance for the follow-up implementation of the action plan. So if your group can identify the potential collaboration between Mavic and also COICA and also the Ministry of Fisheries and Ministry of Environment for future training, based on this, the first level online training, but then maybe after COVID situation, maybe the Mavic team can come and visit Fiji, and also maybe dive together and then do some on-site training, or the other way, maybe some of experts from Fiji can be invited to Mavic and also learn how to use those equipment. So yes, I have liberty to suggest this, but I strongly encourage that this element should be highlighted in the action plan, so that there is a follow-up by COICA and maybe follow-up funding from COICA. Yes, Dr. Mo, I want to really see this this program growing, and not just doing it in a shallow manner, but really bear some fruit for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. That's a great question, but I did not expect that question coming. So you got me, off guard. Anyway, I really appreciate your question. And also, that'll be very great if you include your resource of a taxonomist and the areas. Like I understand, I'm not taxonomist. I understand the taxonomists cannot cover many species. They can only cover few areas. So if the taxonomists got together, I think they will generate more information, and I think that will be the foundation of sharing information. Okay. Oh, Miss Mel, please.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I had actually posted up my question on the chat, but my question was mostly towards the last bit of his presentation, with regards to him mentioning that some species are documented and some actually disappear. This is amazing because with the study of taxonomy, it is this is the first time for me to hear that some species that have been documented have disappeared. So in Fiji, we might have no knowledge at all with some of the species that might have disappeared and have not been classified in any way whatsoever. So my question is directed towards disappearances of some of these species that have been documented. What would be the most probable causes of some of them disappearing from Mr. Bach's point of view? Is it inclusive of climatic changes in climatic conditions, for example?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mayo, for a wonderful question. I think you are trying to already give us answer by raising an example, but Dr. Beck, from his point of view, the pollution is also very critical fact to make these species disappear. And he also okay, and like a construction project near the coastal area, and he think that also affects this extinction. Thank you for a great question, and I agree with you, Ms. Mayo.
Thank you.
Dr. Mo, can I just jump in?
Sure, anytime, Madam Chair.
Yes, I think that's a very important point. And yeah, I don't think we know specifically why some species disappear, because it could be sometimes natural variation. But then, of course, as mentioned by Dr. Mo, the habitat loss and coastal development, and then pollution, eutrophication, and all these factors come together and make those species vulnerable. And with the also ocean acidification and climate change, is really making all the situation getting more difficult for species. And I think that all these compounded impacts and become a threat for the species loss. So it's not only climate change, but the climate change itself would be, or the other way, the local impacts, local threats are making the species more vulnerable to the impacts from the climate change. So it's really compounded, I'm losing my English because it's getting midnight here. So anyway, but I think you got the point. Local impacts together with the climate change and ocean acidification altogether. Thank you.
I see.
Need more tea. I need tea from Fiji. That's
Sure. Thank you for your contribution, Madam Chair. I understand it's very late in Montreal. I see the question from Miss Meliki Rakuro, which is there an app to identify sea creatures? And then according to Dr. Beck, there's no app which is identifies at the level of species. But there are some apps to utilize the imagery at a family or genus level. So I think it depends on how precise you want to identify. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Or it can, oh, okay. Olivia again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Since a lot of questions are based technical questions and scientific questions, just have a very simple you, Mr. Mo. What is your point of view having women, because you're on gender equality, engaged in the scientific research that you have worked alongside with? Have any issues working with women in your research field?
Is your question to me or to Dr. Beck? So, because when you said your
Can you hear
field,
me?
oh, sorry again.
Yes, to you, Mr. Mo. No, because, pardon?
Okay, so let me explain. Dr. Beck is taxonomist, and I'm a lawyer. So it answer can be different depending on your who you are asking your question to.
Just based technical questions and scientific questions have been. Pardon? Do you want me to repeat the question, or I just type it in the chat?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Repeat the question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, like I've mentioned, a lot of questions are based on technical and scientific terms. I just have a simple question for you, Mr. Mo, as a male scientist. Do you also have issues, because we're on gender equality?
Mm-hmm.
For your
I see.
perspective, how do you see working alongside women in your field of work
Okay, good.
and the challenges faced?
Thank you very much. This is also another difficult question to answer. And I've been asked this question before, like why you are doing this gender program, gender related program, especially female, when you are male. And then my answer was, my mother is female. And then I was part of my mother for 9 months. So I'm very related to female. And from my point of view, gender equality is very important. If we don't listen to female as a whole, we are losing our opportunity to listen half of the human. So I think the respecting and listen to female a whole, or the gender equality, is very important in terms of diversity in opinion, and also diversity in opinion. That's how I think and how I approach this program. And I see the gender equality is very important for us, for this generation, for next generation coming. I hope that answered the question. And our challenges, and it's very not usual to see this many female faces in the online conferences. Mostly I faced the male. So now I start to understand how difficult or challenging for females to live in gender biased society. So, developing and implementing this program gives me great opportunity to understand the females' obstacles and challenges. So, that was a very philosophical question, and then I hope I answered well. And then I hope my question meets Olivia's question. Thank you. I see Koika 16.
Another question, Dr. Mo. This is in regards to the question raised by Eva, the disappearance of some species that have already been identified. The question is, once you identify these species, you're supposed to be preserving them. When do you start with the preservation of these species, knowing that they will become not extinct, but they will disappear very soon? And what were some of the actions taken or process followed? And what were some of the challenges in trying to maintain or fulfill these actions that you must have come up with in order to be able to preserve some of the species that might have disappeared or have disappeared?
Just a moment, please. He's very struggling to answer your question.
Yeah, that's because he doesn't know.
Dr. Mo, maybe we can invite also Luciana while Dr. Beck is preparing his response. I think the message about appear and disappear was kind of communicated not in a clear manner, which invite a lot of also question. But then in general, I think Luciana can also answer that question. Luciana, are you here?
Yes, I am. And I think this is
안 들려요, 지금. 적어줘.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I think this is a very interesting debate. Of course, I think there are many angles also to discuss this topic, and I think one was what June mentioned earlier. So in terms of understanding the different pressures, but I think this follow-up question is more, how do you determine the measures for protecting the species, right? So, well, there's also very complex studies that need to go into that, because the vulnerability of species can be very different, of course. So it's knowing it's not only identifying in the survey in particular, but understanding it in a more general or wider context. Is this a species that is more broadly distributed? What is the connectivity of this population, so that they can, if they may start to disappear in the sense of the population becoming affected in a certain place, are we talking about the actual extinction of the species, or so there's quite a lot of details that we need to think about when we discuss species and population decline. And then the different measures that can be applied also can be very different depending on the various dynamics or the particular dynamics for species, because we do have, for example, if it's a species and that happens in, for example, giving an example of deep sea coral, right? It's a very long-lived species that would be very hard with a reproductive system that would also not allow that species to more effectively recover. So that species would need a different type of protection or a measure that needs to consider all these different criteria. So the vulnerability criteria, the different sorry, I'm also suffering from tiredness here, so my articulation of thoughts is also declining. But I think I've already addressed some of the different points. So this then can be very targeted measures that specifically apply for a species, and in the case of fisheries, for example, where you would have to stop fishing for a particular species for a certain period of time, or so there could be special temporal measures, combination of networks of protected areas, many different aspects considering the various characteristics of the species and populations. I think with a lot of words, I hope I have addressed your question.
Yes.
And
yes, thank
Dr.
you.
Bach may want to add something, as I tend to be biased in giving examples more for deep sea. But please, Dr. Mo, I don't know if you would like to add something.
Thank you, Dr. Genio. Dr. Beck just gave me the long writing for answer. And he said, regarding in terms of the question asked, as soon as we recognize the species is disappearing, we need to take actions. However, in many cases, we don't even recognize, and the species are disappearing. This is why we have to do our taxonomy. And he also gave us a very another point. We have to be very careful when we take action to protect the species, because the artificial action is not always effective for the species. And so what he's saying is that we have to be very careful to establish the action program to protect the species. But his main point is, as soon as we recognize the species disappearing, we need to take actions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Is there any question?
Dr. Mo, I may just add in case not everybody saw the chat, I posted a link there for the deep sea species ID app that is available through Worms. And yeah, so there was an earlier question about app an app for identifying species. Yes, this is not fully comprehensive, but it's just an example of an existing app for deep sea species. And I thought that question was very important because this is something also in terms of collaborative approaches and sharing of data. These tools can be quite effectively as well. So I think it's important to understand for specific, in the case of Fiji, what are the field guides or other existing documentation. And we saw earlier one presentation that mentioned many records of fish species that are documented. So this can be also an interesting way of sharing that information, maybe in a more user-friendly and innovative way. So I'm just giving some more ideas for the future, next few days discussions.
Dr. Mo, can I also make one comment?
Please.
Yes, it's about the term that we use. In this meeting, we are using like interchangeably gender equality and gender equity. But I suggest we should use gender equity. I will just read the difference between equality and equity. Equality means each individual or a group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. So there is very nice, very famous also picture showing what we mean by equality and the gender equity. So for example, if there is a vulnerable group of people who has a very different circumstances and challenges circumstances, and just providing the same opportunity doesn't really lead those groups to reach an equal outcome. But then equity considers those different circumstances and provide different level of resources so that we can reach equal outcome. So I will send Dr. Mo this drawing, which is being used whenever we address the gender issue. So I suggest that we clarify the terms between gender equality and equity, and I suggest that we use gender equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's a fair proposal, and I don't think we have problem to accept to use the gender equity instead of gender equality. Oh, Miss Olivia, would you like to say something? No? I saw you raising hands. Was it just waving? Okay. 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 Unless anyone objected the using term gender equity, we'll use the term gender equity instead of gender equality. Okay. Thank you. And I will release our ISA colleagues from now. I think they definitely need to go to sleep. And I think we can end today's session right now. Before I close this, oh, Ms. Tarisi, go ahead, please.
Yeah,
Okay.
just a comment and a question. A research on idea of sorry.
Right. Has there been any economic opportunities, exploration of marketable products of these new species?
Dr. Mo,
Okay.
did you get the question? If was there any attempt, like for example, finding new species and use it for new materials or cosmetics or pharmaceutical? I think that's the question. How the commercialization of the new species or new materials from the ocean. I think Mabik is also working on this, right? Do you have any example?
Yes, but it depends on so far I don't think we have any commercialized the product from new species, because Mavic was established 5 years ago, so we did not have enough time to find the new species and went to the commercialized phase because it takes a very long time. However, especially the new species, we have very limited understanding of the new species, the mechanism. So it is very difficult for us to develop the commercial product. But we do have commercial products from the species, but so far we don't have the commercial product from new species by Mavi, but we are expecting to have one. Thank you.
Maybe Luciana, can you share also how understanding deep sea species or deep sea ecology is really giving us humanity a knowledge about the evolution, about humanity, and also even the possibility of using some of those materials and understanding, their how they get energy and for other also purposes, like some materials maybe can be used sending people to the space, all this. I mean, it may sound like sci-fi at this stage, but I think there are some of those opportunities that we can maybe highlight. Luciana.
Sure, June, thanks for that question. Yes, I think there is not so much scientific fiction anymore. I think there is a very clear, very good example to mention as we are going and we are hopefully overcoming this pandemic. But one of the key mechanisms that was now identified as to be used in some of the vaccines that to fight COVID started with the discoveries of those bacteria in extreme environments in hydrothermal vents. So this is a very clear example of the potential of the species that are found across the ocean, that like Dr. Mo was saying, it takes time to understand exactly, how we might not even know all the potential that they have, but by describing them and by starting to study more their biology and to understand their function and to go into more their physiology and other aspects, then they can, some of these discoveries may become really important for medical applications, from other pharmaceuticals and many other. And yes, understanding in particular these extreme environments has really helped to understand the evolution in general in our planet. So I think this is not so much I think fiction anymore. I think it's really becoming and opening many more opportunities for understanding the value of the oceans, and but of course it's also contentious, I think, topic, because we need to also understand to what extent we can use all these resources. So again, I think it's yeah, I think another aspect that it just crossed my mind is how these animals can also be inspiring solutions. So I think another big field that is developing is called biomimicry. And this is the engineering and technological developments that are inspired in animal behavior, animal form, how animals have adapted, and for example, how the shark skin has inspired swimsuits developments, or how the movement of squids can also inspire other, I can't remember which tool was it that was inspired on that, but it's all these learning from the animal behavior, the animal biology, that can really help to make a lot of discoveries that can become also very important uses for humans in general. So I think, yes, thanks for bringing that inspiration, June, because I also get very much fascinated by that. And I think that also gives another big reason and strength to the importance of taxonomy. So the understanding not only, what species are there, but what they do and how they can live. It's really the value of studying taxonomy, because you don't need to necessarily have all the species names to know or to, in general terms, characterize a community. You can call it A, B, C, D. And as long as you know what A, B, C, D means and can compare, that could be enough to do more like general surveying and understanding distributions. But if you really want to understand the species and how that species can really tolerate different impacts, natural or human impacts, or how they can really find a mechanism, then you need the taxonomy, and you need to go in the details and understanding the relationships with other species and the systematics that Dr. Bach mentioned. So yeah, I think this is also good reminder and encouragement to the work of taxonomists that needs to continue. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luciana. Indeed, whole Marbix activities are based on taxonomy. What Marbix does is also we have Department of Applied Science. The department is focusing on extracting the useful components from the marine species. Also, they analyze the DNAs, and also they try to develop the commercial product. But they all say first step is from exact identification. So we consider the taxonomy, the identification is very important. Also, and I see the chat box, and then there are some questions I think I have to answer. First, the country presentation is still pending. I do understand, and I try to find another time, but please make the presentation within 10 minutes. 10 minutes, please. It's really difficult to find the time between the schedules. If this happened in Mavi campus, it'll be okay, but in online setting, it's not always easy to find the right time. And second, will there be template provided for the action plan? I already provided the template. Do you remember the presentation with the elements? That's the template. So as long as you include that elements, that's going to be action plan. And then, as Madam Chair suggested yesterday, you may come out with suggestion if you believes there are elements we should cover. Yeah. Okay, it seems like everybody's okay with my answer. So if anyone has any questions, and I will close today's meeting here, and then release my ISA colleagues. Okay, thank you very much for today, and see you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Good afternoon.